Some storms don't destroy your life when they arrive, they destroy it when they leave. The hurricane had already swallowed most of the North Carolina coastline by the time Claire Dawson locked the front door of her veterinary clinic. Rain hammered against the windows so hard it sounded like handfuls of gravel thrown from the darkness. The emergency alerts on her phone had been screaming for hours. Mandatory evacuation, flash flooding, life-threatening conditions. But there were still animals inside the clinic that depended on her, and Claire had never been very good at walking away from something that needed saving. Outside, the world looked submerged beneath sheets of silver rain. Streetlights flickered through the storm like distant stars struggling to survive. Water rushed along the sidewalks in fast-moving currents. The wind bent palm trees until they looked ready to snap. Claire pulled her hood tighter and hurried toward her pickup truck parked beside the building. She was exhausted. 20 straight hours of emergency animal care had left her muscles aching and her eyes burning. All she wanted was to get home before the roads disappeared beneath the floodwater. The engine started on the second try. She exhaled with relief and pulled onto the nearly abandoned road. Less than 3 miles separated her from the small house she rented near the waterfront. Normally it was a 10-minute drive. Tonight it felt like crossing an ocean. Visibility dropped with every passing minute. The windshield wipers struggled to keep up. Water splashed against the sides of the truck as she navigated through flooded intersections. More than once she considered turning back. Then she saw something moving. At first she thought it was debris, a fallen branch, a broken sign. But as her headlights swept across the flooded roadway, she realized it was a person. Claire slammed the brakes. The truck skidded slightly before stopping. Her heart jumped into her throat. 20 yards ahead, partially submerged in rushing water, a man was struggling to stay upright. The storm swallowed most details. She could only see a dark figure stumbling through waist-deep floodwater. The wind nearly knocked him off his feet. "Oh no," she whispered. Every rational thought told her to keep driving. Emergency responders had spent all day warning people not to leave their vehicles. One wrong step could sweep someone into a drainage channel or flood canal, but the man collapsed. Claire stared through the windshield for half a second. Then she threw the truck into park. The rain hit her instantly when she stepped outside. Cold, sharp, relentless. Water surged around her knees as she fought her way toward him. The closer she got, the stranger he seemed. His clothes were expensive. Not the kind worn by people in her small town. A dark coat soaked by rain, tailored slacks, shoes that looked completely out of place in a hurricane. The man tried to rise again but failed. Claire reached him just as another powerful gust swept across the road. "Hey," she shouted above the wind. "Can you hear me?" He looked up. For a brief second their eyes met. Even through the rain she noticed something unusual. Not fear, not panic. Calculation. The look of someone measuring every threat around him. Then his strength vanished. He nearly collapsed again. Claire grabbed his arm before he could fall. "You need help." He tried to speak. The words disappeared beneath the storm. Together they fought through the rushing water toward her truck. Every step felt harder than the last. The stranger leaned heavily against her shoulder, though he seemed reluctant to accept the support, as if needing help offended him somehow. Finally they reached the truck. Claire managed to get him inside the passenger seat before climbing behind the wheel herself. The heater blasted warm air. Rain rattled against the roof. For several seconds neither of them spoke. The stranger stared through the windshield, breathing slowly, controlled, deliberate. Then Claire noticed the phone. It rested partially hidden beneath his coat. Black, sleek, unlike any phone she had ever seen. Its screen flashed briefly with lines of encrypted text before going dark. The stranger immediately covered it with one hand, instinctively, protectively. Claire looked away. Something about that small movement unsettled her more than the storm outside. The man didn't answer. Thunder rolled across the sky. Lightning illuminated the flooded road ahead. For a moment his face became visible, sharp features. Dark hair soaked with rain. A faint scar near his jaw, the face of someone who clearly didn't belong in a disaster zone alone. He closed his eyes. His breathing grew heavier. "Listen," Claire said carefully. "I'm taking you somewhere safe." The stranger opened his eyes again. This time there was urgency in them. His voice emerged as little more than a rough whisper. "Don't let them find me." Before Claire could ask what he meant, his head tilted back against the seat. Outside, the hurricane continued tearing through the night, and somewhere beyond the wall of rain, headlights appeared in the darkness. The storm had a way of making every sound feel larger than life. The distant rumble of thunder seemed closer. The rain striking the windshield sounded heavier. Even Claire Dawson's own heartbeat felt loud inside the cab of the truck as she stared at the headlights emerging through the curtain of water. They were far away at first, two pale beams cutting through the darkness. Then another pair appeared behind them, and another. The stranger noticed them too, his eyes fixed on the approaching lights. Every trace of exhaustion seemed to vanish for a moment. His hand tightened around the edge of the seat. Claire looked from the road to him. "Do you know them?" she asked. He remained silent. Outside, floodwater continued rushing across the pavement. The vehicles were still several hundred yards away, but they were moving slowly and deliberately as if searching. Claire swallowed. Something about the situation felt wrong. If those people were friends looking for him, why did he seem worried? If they were enemies, why had he been alone in the middle of a hurricane? Questions piled up faster than answers. Another flash of lightning illuminated the road. The stranger leaned forward slightly, watching the lights. Then his gaze shifted toward Claire. "Drive." His voice was weak but firm. Claire stared at him. "You need medical attention. Drive," she almost argued. Instead, she pressed the accelerator. The truck rolled forward through the flooded street. Behind them, the distant headlights continued moving. For the next 15 minutes, neither of them spoke. The storm dominated everything. Wind battered the truck. Tree branches littered the road. More than once, Claire had to navigate around debris washed into the street. Finally, her small waterfront neighborhood came into view. Most of the houses were dark. Power had failed hours ago. Only the occasional glow of backup generators broke the darkness. Claire pulled into her driveway and shut off the engine. Rain continued pounding against the roof. The stranger looked toward the house but made no move to leave. "Can you walk?" she asked. He nodded once. The effort of standing clearly cost him energy, but together they managed to reach the front porch. The moment Claire unlocked the door, warm air greeted them, not because the power was working. It was not. But the familiar scent of home felt comforting after hours inside the storm. She guided him to the living room sofa. A battery lantern cast soft golden light across the room. Shadows danced against the walls. The stranger sat carefully, studying every corner of the house with quiet attention. Claire noticed it immediately. He was evaluating exits, windows, sight lines, the habits of someone used to being alert. "You act like somebody is chasing you," she said. His expression revealed nothing. Claire disappeared briefly into the bathroom and returned with clean towels and a first aid kit. She set everything on the coffee table. "You are lucky I keep emergency supplies." The stranger glanced at the kit, then at her. "You always help people?" Claire laughed softly. "Animals mostly." For the first time, something resembling amusement flickered across his face. It vanished almost instantly. She knelt beside the coffee table and examined him more carefully under the lantern light. The expensive coat was soaked. His clothes a hurricane evacuation zone. Nothing about him fit the situation. Not the clothes, not the encrypted phone, not the guarded way he spoke. Claire had spent years reading frightened animals. She recognized fear when she saw it. This was something different, control. Even exhausted, even stranded, he seemed determined not to surrender control of anything. Outside, the storm howled against the house. Inside, silence settled between them. Minutes passed. The stranger's breathing gradually slowed. Claire assumed he had fallen asleep, then a sharp sound broke the quiet. An engine. She moved toward the front window. Through a narrow gap in the curtains, she saw headlights moving slowly down the street. One vehicle, then another. Large, dark SUVs. Her stomach tightened. The vehicles crawled through the neighborhood, stopping briefly in front of several homes before continuing forward. Searching, Claire glanced back toward the stranger. He had not moved, but his eyes were open now. Watching, listening, waiting. The first SUV rolled past her driveway, then the second. For a moment she thought they would continue on. Instead, both vehicles slowed. The brake lights glowed red through the rain. Claire felt the air leave her lungs. The SUVs stopped directly in front of her house. And then someone knocked on the front door. The knock was calm, not loud, not urgent. Somehow that made it worse. Claire stood frozen beside the window as rain streamed down the glass. Outside, the two black SUVs sat motionless beneath the storm. Their headlights cut through the darkness like pale searchlights. The stranger rose from the sofa with surprising speed for someone who had looked ready to collapse less than an hour earlier. Every trace of fatigue disappeared behind sharp focus. His eyes moved toward the front door, then toward the hallway, then toward the back of the house, calculating, measuring, preparing. Claire noticed it immediately. This was not the behavior of an ordinary man. Another knock echoed through the house. 3 slow taps. The stranger looked at her. "Do not answer it." His voice remained low and controlled. Claire folded her arms. "This is my house. Then I am asking you." Something in the way he said it made her hesitate. Not a command, a warning. The knock came again. This time a voice followed. "Sir, if you are inside, we are here to help." Claire frowned. The voice sounded professional. Calm, not threatening. She glanced toward the stranger. His expression did not change. Outside, lightning flashed across the sky. For a split second she saw several figures standing near the vehicles. Dark raincoats, no visible weapons, no obvious signs of danger, just men waiting in the storm. "They seem worried about you," Claire said quietly. The stranger gave a faint smile that never reached his eyes. "That does not mean I should trust them." Before Claire could respond, her phone vibrated. The sudden sound startled her. She looked at the screen. No signal, no message. Just a weather alert warning residents to remain indoors. The storm continued to intensify. Wind rattled the windows. Somewhere down the block, a transformer exploded in a shower of blue light. The neighborhood briefly illuminated before darkness swallowed everything again. The stranger stepped closer to the window and carefully shifted the curtain by less than an inch. Claire watched him study the vehicles outside. Seconds passed, then he relaxed slightly. Not much, just enough for her to notice. "What?" He let the curtain fall back into place. "Those are not the people I expected." Claire stared at him. "You expected someone?" He ignored the question. Another habit she was beginning to notice. He answered only the questions he wanted to answer. Everything else vanished into silence. The knocking stopped. Outside, one of the men walked back toward the lead SUV. The group appeared to exchange a few words. Then, to Claire's surprise, both vehicles slowly pulled away from the curb. Their headlights disappeared into the storm. The stranger released a slow breath. For the first time all night, genuine relief crossed his face. Claire noticed it immediately. "Who are you?" she asked again. This time he did not look away. The lantern cast warm light across the room. Rain whispered against the roof. For a moment the storm seemed very far away. "Someone who owes you a great deal," he said. Claire laughed softly. "That is not an answer. It is the only one I can give tonight." Before she could push further, his knees nearly buckled. The sudden loss of strength caught both of them off guard. Claire moved forward instinctively and steadied him. The stranger looked annoyed with himself more than anything else. "Sit down," she said firmly. "That is not a request." To her surprise, he obeyed. Minutes later, he was asleep on the sofa, really asleep this time. Claire remained awake. The house felt unusually quiet after the tension of the evening. She sat in a nearby chair and watched the storm through the window. Occasionally her eyes drifted back toward the stranger. In sleep he looked different, younger somehow, less dangerous, less guarded. The hard edges disappeared. Unfortunately for Claire, what she could not see was happening less than a mile away. Deep inside an abandoned marina battered by hurricane winds, another black SUV rolled beneath a damaged warehouse roof. A man stepped out and studied a photograph glowing on a phone screen. The image showed Claire's truck driving through floodwater hours earlier. Another man approached. "She found him?" The first man nodded. Rain hammered against the metal roof overhead. "Then we have a problem." Back at the house, Claire finally drifted into an uneasy sleep in the armchair. Dawn remained hours away. The hurricane still raged beyond the walls. And neither she nor the stranger sleeping on her sofa realized that someone else now knew exactly where they were. Claire woke to silence. After an entire night of screaming wind and relentless rain, the absence of noise felt unnatural. For several seconds she remained motionless in the armchair, disoriented by the pale morning light filtering through the windows. Then she remembered the stranger sleeping on her sofa. Her eyes immediately moved toward the living room. The sofa was empty. The blanket she had left draped over him was neatly folded. Panic flickered through her chest. She stood quickly and scanned the room. The front door remained locked. The windows were closed. Nothing appeared disturbed. "Hello?" she called. No answer. Claire walked through the house, checking each room. The guest bathroom was empty. The kitchen was empty. The small back porch overlooked standing water and debris scattered across neighboring yards. No sign of him. Then she noticed something on the kitchen counter. A stack of cash sat beside a handwritten note. Claire stared at it for several seconds before walking closer. The note contained only 4 words. "Thank you for everything." No name, no explanation, no phone number, just 4 words written in clean, precise handwriting. Claire looked at the money. It was more cash than she typically earned in several weeks at the clinic. Her jaw tightened immediately. Something about it irritated her. She had not helped him for money. The gesture felt less like gratitude and more like an attempt to settle a debt. As though saving a life could be reduced to a financial transaction, she folded the note and slipped it into a drawer. The cash remained exactly where it was. Outside, the hurricane had finally moved inland. The world looked exhausted. Fallen branches littered the streets. Traffic lights hung crooked above intersections. Several buildings near the waterfront had visible flood damage. By mid-morning, Claire arrived at her veterinary clinic. The parking lot was partially flooded, but the building itself had survived remarkably well. She spent the next several hours helping pet owners, checking emergency supplies, and assisting families returning after the evacuation. The rhythm of work helped push the stranger from her thoughts, at least for a while. Around 3 in the afternoon, she stepped outside carrying a box of donated supplies. That was when she noticed the black sedan parked across the street. It was impossible to miss. Expensive, immaculate, completely out of place among damaged buildings and cleanup crews, the vehicle remained stationary. Its windows were tinted dark enough to conceal whoever sat inside. Claire felt a strange chill despite the humid afternoon air. She told herself she was imagining things, yet every time she glanced outside over the next hour, the sedan remained there, watching, waiting. By sunset, concern had evolved into annoyance. She locked the clinic and walked directly toward the vehicle. The moment she stepped off the curb, the driver's door opened. A man in a dark suit emerged, tall, professional, early 40s. He carried himself with the calm confidence of someone accustomed to responsibility. "Miss Dawson," he said politely. Claire stopped. "How do you know my name?" The man smiled slightly. "Someone wishes to thank you properly." Claire immediately knew who. "Tell him I do not need thanking." That answer caught her off guard. The man extended a small envelope. Nevertheless, he insisted I deliver this personally. Claire hesitated before accepting it. The envelope contained a single card embossed with a name, Rafael Castellano. Beneath the name was a phone number, nothing else. No company, no title, no explanation. "Who is Rafael Castellano?" she asked. The suited man studied her carefully. "A man who does not forget favors." Claire looked back at the card. The name meant nothing to her, yet something about it felt important, familiar somehow, though she could not explain why. When she looked up again, the man was already returning to the sedan. Within moments, the vehicle disappeared into evening traffic. Claire remained standing alone beside the clinic. The sky glowed orange beyond the damaged waterfront. Seagulls circled above shattered docks. The storm was finally over. At least that was what she believed. Unfortunately for Claire, what she did not know was that less than 20 miles away, another group of men had gathered inside a damaged marina office. Spread across a table were photographs taken during the hurricane. One image showed a flooded road. Another showed Claire's truck. A third showed her helping a stranger climb into the passenger seat. And in the center of the table sat a photograph of Rafael Castellano. One of the men tapped Claire's picture with a finger. "If he trusts her," he said quietly, "she becomes part of the problem." For the next 3 days, Claire tried to convince herself that Rafael Castellano belonged to a strange chapter of her life that had already ended. The hurricane cleanup consumed the town. Power crews worked around the clock. Families repaired damaged homes. Boats sat stranded in parking lots where floodwater had left them behind like forgotten toys. Life slowly returned to normal, or at least something close to normal. Yet every evening when the clinic finally grew quiet, her eyes drifted toward the business card sitting inside her desk drawer. She never called the number. She told herself she had no reason to. Still, she never threw it away. On Friday afternoon, a local non-profit organized a fundraiser to help families affected by the hurricane. The event was being held at one of the largest hotels on the coast. Several veterinarians had been invited because of their volunteer work during the evacuation. Claire almost declined. She hated formal events, but after a week of exhaustion and endless cleanup, her best friend Megan convinced her to attend. The ballroom looked nothing like the damaged streets outside. Crystal chandeliers reflected warm light across polished floors. Soft music drifted through the room. Men in tailored suits and women in elegant dresses mingled beneath banners promoting disaster relief efforts. Claire felt completely out of place. She adjusted the sleeve of her navy dress and accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing server. Around her, conversations flowed easily. Donations, insurance claims, reconstruction projects. She listened politely while wishing she were back at the clinic. It happened so subtly that most people probably never noticed. Conversations did not stop. Nobody gasped. No dramatic announcement echoed through the ballroom, yet somehow the entire room shifted. Claire felt it before she understood it. Voices lowered. Slightly, attention moved toward the entrance. She followed the movement instinctively. A tall man stepped into the ballroom. For a second, she barely recognized him. Gone were the soaked clothes and exhaustion. Gone was the injured stranger from the hurricane. Raphael looked entirely different beneath the golden light. His dark suit fit perfectly. His posture carried effortless confidence. People greeted him with immediate respect, some with admiration, others with something closer to caution. He shook hands, accepted greetings, offered polite smiles, yet despite the crowd surrounding him, he seemed strangely detached from it all. Then his eyes found hers. The distance between them was nearly 50 feet. The room contained hundreds of people, yet somehow the connection felt immediate. Raphael stopped walking. Claire felt her heartbeat quicken unexpectedly. Less than a second later, he changed direction and began moving through the crowd toward her. "You know him?" Megan whispered. "Not really." The answer sounded weak even to Claire. Raphael reached them moments later. "Claire." Her name sounded different in his voice. Familiar, deliberate. "You disappeared," she said before she could stop herself. A faint smile appeared. "That is an interesting way to thank someone for surviving." Claire almost smiled back. "Almost. You left a pile of cash on my counter. You did save my life. That was not why I helped you." Something warm flickered behind his eyes. Genuine appreciation. The noise of the ballroom seemed distant. Then another man approached Raphael and quietly handed him a tablet. The interaction lasted only seconds, yet Claire noticed the change immediately. Raphael's expression hardened, the warmth vanished. His attention shifted toward the screen. Something on it clearly concerned him. "Is everything okay?" she asked. Raphael looked up. The guarded version of him had returned. "Just business." It was the same answer he always gave whenever conversations moved too close to something important. Business. Claire was beginning to dislike the word. Before she could respond, a photographer moved through the crowd capturing images for the fundraiser newsletter. The camera flashed several times nearby. One photograph displayed on a preview screen caught Claire's attention. It showed storm damage from the hurricane, flooded streets, emergency vehicles, rescue volunteers. Then she saw something familiar, her truck. The image had been taken from a distance during the storm. She stepped closer. Raphael noticed the photograph at the exact same moment. Both of them froze. There, partially visible near the passenger side of the truck, stood a third figure neither of them remembered seeing that night. Someone watching from the darkness, someone holding an umbrella despite hurricane-force winds, and for the first time since the storm, Claire saw genuine concern appear in Rafael Castellano's eyes. The photograph refused to leave Claire's mind. Even after the fundraiser ended and the ballroom emptied, she could still see the shadowy figure standing beside the flooded road. The image had been blurry, distorted by rain and distance. Yet one detail remained impossible to ignore. Whoever had been watching that night had not looked surprised by the storm. He had looked prepared for it. 3 days later, sunlight finally returned to the coast. The ocean sparkled beneath clear skies. Tourists slowly reappeared. Restaurants reopened. Life continued. But Claire found herself staring at that memory whenever she had a quiet moment. Late Tuesday afternoon, her phone rang while she was finishing paperwork at the clinic. The number was unfamiliar. She almost ignored it. "Almost." "Hello," a familiar voice answered. Calm, controlled. "I need your help." Claire leaned back in her chair. That is a dangerous way to start a conversation. Silence lingered briefly before she heard what sounded suspiciously like amusement. "Meet me at Harbor Point Marina in 1 hour." "You still have not explained who you are." "I know. That is not reassuring." 1 hour. The line disconnected. Claire stared at the phone. Part of her wanted to refuse, another part wanted answers. Curiosity won. Harbor Point Marina looked very different after the hurricane. Several docks remained closed. Broken pilings protruded from the water like skeletal remains. Sleep crews worked in the distance. Fishing boats rocked gently against repaired slips. Claire spotted Raphael immediately. He stood near the end of a weathered dock overlooking the bay. No suit this time, no formal event, just a dark jacket and rolled sleeves. For the first time he looked almost ordinary. Almost. "You have a habit of disappearing," Claire said as she approached, "and you have a habit of finding me anyway." She hated how easily that answer made her smile. Raphael gestured toward the water. "I need to know something about the night of the storm." Claire crossed her arms. "You mean the night you nearly froze to death on a flooded road?" "That one." His attention shifted toward the marina beyond them. "Did you see anyone else?" Claire immediately thought of the photograph. Raphael nodded slowly. The response seemed to confirm something rather than disappoint him. "That photograph changed things. For you or for me?" Both. The answer unsettled her. Wind drifted across the water, carrying the scent of salt and seagrass. Eagles circled overhead. For a few moments neither spoke. Then Raphael removed his phone and displayed an enlarged copy of the fundraiser image. The quality remained poor, but additional editing had revealed more details. The mysterious figure stood near a damaged utility pole. An umbrella obscured most facial features. Yet something else had become visible. A distinctive ring glinted on one hand. Claire studied the image carefully. Raphael's jaw tightened slightly. Because whoever that person is should not have been there. You know him? I know the ring. Before Claire could ask another question, a voice called Raphael's name from farther down the dock. A man approached, carrying a folder, mid-30s, athletic build, professional appearance. The two men exchanged a brief look. Something passed silently between them. The newcomer handed Raphael several documents before walking away again. Claire watched the interaction carefully. Friend, she asked. Something like that. Several photographs rested inside. He studied them quietly. The longer he looked, the more serious his expression became. What is it? Claire asked. He hesitated, not because he did not trust her, because he was deciding how much to reveal. Someone knew exactly where I would be before the hurricane arrived. Claire felt a chill despite the warm afternoon. That sounds impossible. I thought so too. The ocean shimmered behind him. Boats drifted lazily in the harbor. The peaceful scene felt strangely disconnected from the tension growing between them. Raphael closed the folder. I need to find out who leaked that information. Claire stared at him. You are talking like someone betrayed you. His eyes met hers. For a brief moment she saw something she had never seen before. Not confidence, not control, doubt. That is exactly what I am talking about. Less than half a mile away, hidden inside a parked truck overlooking the marina, camera lens focused silently on the dock. Several photographs were taken in quick succession. One captured Raphael, another captured Claire. The final image captured both of them standing together beside the water. And somewhere beyond the marina, someone smiled when the photographs arrived. Some truths arrive like thunder, others arrive in silence. Claire discovered the difference 2 nights later. The call came shortly after midnight. She had fallen asleep on the couch with paperwork spread across the coffee table when her phone vibrated. The number was blocked. For a moment she considered ignoring it. Then she answered, Claire. Raphael's voice sounded different, tighter, more urgent. She sat upright immediately. What happened? I need you to leave your house. Sleep vanished instantly. What? Right now? Claire stood and moved toward the window. The street outside appeared completely normal. A few porch lights glowed. Palm trees swayed gently in the ocean breeze. Nothing looked threatening. Raphael, you are not making any sense. I know. His voice lowered. Please trust me anyway. Before she could ask another question, headlights swept across her front yard. A black SUV rolled slowly past the house. Then another followed behind it. Neither vehicle stopped, yet neither belonged in her quiet neighborhood either. Claire felt her stomach tighten. What is going on? She asked. This time Raphael answered immediately. Someone has been watching you. Silence filled the room. The words felt unreal. Because of you? Another pause. Longer this time. Yes. Claire closed her eyes. She had known something was wrong for weeks. The strange photographs, the mysterious phone calls, the feeling of being observed. Now the pieces were beginning to connect. Who are you? She asked quietly. The question hung between them. For several seconds she heard only the distant sound of traffic through the phone. Then Raphael exhaled slowly, almost as if he had reached a decision. I will explain everything. 40 minutes later, a luxury SUV pulled into her driveway. Claire climbed inside, carrying a small overnight bag and more questions than answers. The drive north lasted nearly 2 hours. City lights gradually replaced coastal highways. Tall buildings rose against the night sky. Raphael sat beside her in silence for most of the journey. The closer they got to the city, the more security vehicles appeared around them. Claire noticed them immediately. Dark SUVs, professional drivers, men wearing earpieces. Nobody spoke unnecessarily. Nobody wasted movement. By the time they entered an underground parking garage beneath a glass skyscraper, Claire already knew the truth was going to be bigger than she expected. An elevator carried them to the top floor. The doors opened onto a private penthouse overlooking the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed miles of glittering lights. The apartment felt less like a home and more like a command center, elegant, expensive, controlled. Raphael led her toward the living room. Sit down. Claire remained standing. No, he stopped. No? Not until you tell me what is happening. Moonlight reflected across the windows behind him. For the first time since she had met him, Raphael looked genuinely tired. Not physically tired, emotionally tired. Like a man carrying a burden he no longer wanted to hide. You asked who I am. Claire nodded. My name is Raphael Castellano. I know that part. Most people in this city know it too. Something in his tone made her chest tighten. He walked toward a nearby cabinet and removed a tablet. A few touches later, a news article appeared on the screen, then another and another. Photographs, headlines, business acquisitions, investigations, charity foundations, real estate empires, rumors, stories, power, influence, wealth. Claire stared at the screen, then at Raphael, then back smaller. You are that Raphael Castellano, she whispered. He nodded once. The city lights shimmered behind him. Yes, Claire felt the air leave her lungs. She remembered conversations overheard at the fundraiser, the way people reacted when he entered a room, the caution, the respect, the fear. Suddenly, all of it made sense. You are not just a businessman. Raphael's expression remained unreadable. No. The answer was simple, honest, final. Claire looked away. Her thoughts raced. The injured stranger from the hurricane no longer existed. In his place stood one of the most powerful men she had ever encountered, a man connected to a world she barely understood, a world she had never wanted near her life. Unfortunately for Claire, while she struggled to process the truth, another truth was already moving toward them. Less than a mile away, a phone screen illuminated inside a parked vehicle. A new photograph had just arrived. It showed Raphael and Claire entering the penthouse together. Beneath the image appeared a single message. He finally told her. Claire spent the next several minutes standing beside the massive windows, staring at the city below while trying to reconcile two completely different versions of the same man. One version had been soaked by hurricane rain, exhausted and vulnerable on a flooded road. The other owned a penthouse above one of the most powerful skylines on the East Coast. Neither version seemed entirely real. Behind her, Raphael remained silent. He appeared willing to give her space, which somehow made the situation even more unsettling. Finally, Claire turned around. Why did you hide it? Raphael looked toward the city lights before answering. Because if I had told you the truth that night, you would not have brought me home. Claire wanted to argue. The problem was that he might have been right. She folded her arms. Maybe I deserved the chance to decide for myself. You did. His voice remained calm, and I took that choice away from you. The honesty caught her off guard. She had expected excuses, deflection. Instead, she found something much harder to fight: accountability. The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock at the penthouse door. One of the security men entered carrying a tablet. He approached Raphael and spoke quietly. Claire could not hear the words, but she immediately noticed the tension that followed. Raphael accepted the device and reviewed several images. His expression darkened. The guard left without another word. More bad news? Claire asked. Raphael set the tablet down. Someone photographed us arriving tonight. Claire felt a chill run through her chest. The same people watching my house? Probably. The answer arrived too quickly to be comforting. Silence settled over the room. Beyond the glass, thousands of lights stretched toward the horizon. The city looked peaceful from this height, safe. Yet Claire increasingly felt trapped inside a situation she barely understood. Raphael walked toward a nearby table and poured 2 glasses of water. He handed one to her. I know this is not the life you expected. Claire laughed softly. That might be the understatement of the century. To her surprise, Raphael smiled. The expression transformed him. For a brief moment, the walls around him seemed lower, less guarded, more human. Fair point, he admitted. They moved toward the seating area near the windows. For the first time since arriving, the conversation shifted away from danger. Claire spoke about the veterinary clinic, the animals displaced by the hurricane, the endless hours of rebuilding. Raphael listened carefully, really listened, not the polite attention of someone waiting for his turn to speak. Genuine interest. In return, he revealed small pieces of himself, not enough to explain everything, but enough to suggest a life far more complicated than newspaper headlines could capture. Hours passed without either noticing. At some point, the city lights began reflecting against the dark glass like distant stars. The tension between them softened, not disappeared. Softened. Then Claire remembered something. The photograph from the fundraiser. Raphael's expression immediately sharpened. What about it? You said you recognized the ring. He nodded. I did. Whose ring was it? For the first time that evening, hesitation appeared. Raphael stood and walked toward the window. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. Someone inside my organization wears it. Claire felt her stomach tighten. Someone close to you? Very. The answer explained everything. The secrecy, the concern, the betrayal. Suddenly this was not simply a business problem, it was personal, deeply personal. Claire approached the window. Then why not confront him? Raphael remained silent for several seconds. Because I need proof. The city hummed below them. Traffic moved through illuminated streets. Life continued as normal while invisible battles unfolded behind closed doors. Unfortunately for both of them, neither realized how quickly those battles were approaching. Less than 30 minutes later, deep inside a private office across the city, a man studied a collection of photographs spread across his desk. Several showed Claire, several showed Raphael. One showed both of them standing together at the marina, another showed them entering the penthouse. The man picked up a single photograph and stared at it thoughtfully. Then he reached for his phone. "Move forward," he said quietly. "We cannot let him discover the truth first." Hundreds of feet above the city, Claire stood beside Raphael, watching lights shimmer across the darkness. Neither of them knew that somewhere in the same city, someone had just decided they were running out of time. Morning arrived wrapped in grey clouds and restless uncertainty. Claire had barely slept. The guest suite inside Raphael's penthouse was larger than her entire house back on the coast, yet comfort felt impossible when every answer seemed to reveal two new questions. She stood near the window, watching sunlight struggle through layers of clouds above the city. Far below, traffic flowed through the streets in neat lines. Everything appeared normal, ordinary, yet she knew better now. Somewhere beneath that calm surface, people were watching, planning, waiting. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Raphael stood outside the room, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I remembered how you take it," he said. Claire accepted the cup before realizing what he had said. "You remembered? You put too much cream in it." The observation should not have mattered. Somehow it did. They spent the morning reviewing photographs connected to the hurricane. Raphael's team had collected security footage, traffic camera images, marina records, and weather reports. Blurry images, damaged files, incomplete information, yet Claire noticed something nobody else appeared to notice. During the hurricane, her truck's dashboard camera had been running. She remembered turning it on before leaving the clinic. "Wait," she said suddenly. Raphael looked up from a folder. "What is it? My truck. What about it? The camera?" The room fell silent. Raphael immediately understood. Less than an hour later, they were seated inside a secure office reviewing recovered footage from the storm. The quality was terrible. Rain streaked across the lens. Floodwater distorted visibility. Wind shook the image repeatedly. Still, it was footage. Real footage from the night everything changed. Claire watched herself driving through flooded streets. Then came the moment she spotted Raphael struggling through the storm. The vehicle stopped. She left the truck. The rescue unfolded exactly as she remembered. Then something unexpected appeared, not close enough to attract attention, not far enough to disappear completely. The same figure from the fundraiser photograph, the umbrella, the posture, the patient stillness. Claire leaned forward. There, Raphael immediately paused the video. The image sharpened as much as technology allowed. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Raphael quietly asked for the footage to continue. The next 30 seconds changed everything. As Claire helped him toward the truck, the figure briefly lowered the umbrella. Only for a moment, only for a second. But it was enough. The camera captured a partial profile, not a full face, not complete identification. Yet Raphael's expression hardened instantly. Claire noticed it immediately. "You know him." Raphael remained focused on the screen. "I know who it could be. Could be someone I trusted." The words sounded heavier than anything he had said before. Not anger, disappointment. Claire suddenly understood why this investigation mattered so much. This was never about money or business. It was about betrayal. A few minutes later, another member of Raphael's team entered carrying additional records. The man placed several documents on the table. "We found something else." Raphael reviewed the papers. "What?" Claire asked. Raphael handed her one of the pages. It showed access logs from a private facility near the marina. Several names appeared. Most meant nothing to her. One name had been highlighted, Anthony Marino. "Who is he?" Claire asked. Raphael stared at the document. "One of my most trusted lieutenants, Anthony, the man from the dock, the same man who had handed Raphael documents only days earlier, the same man Claire had assumed was a loyal friend." Suddenly, small details began connecting inside her mind. The private conversations, the unusual timing, the constant presence. "You think he betrayed you?" she asked softly. Raphael looked toward the city beyond the office windows. I think he knew where I was before the hurricane. Before Claire could respond, another phone on the conference table began ringing. One of Raphael's security officers answered immediately. His expression changed within seconds. "Sir," he said carefully. "There is a problem." Raphael turned. "What happened?" The officer swallowed once before answering. "Someone broke into the hurricane archives this morning." Silence filled the room. Claire felt her pulse quicken. "Were they looking for the footage?" she asked. The officer nodded, "and they arrived less than 20 minutes after we requested access." Raphael and Claire exchanged a look. Neither needed to say the obvious conclusion aloud. Someone inside the organization already knew exactly what they were investigating. Trust does not usually break all at once. More often it fractures quietly, one crack at a time, until the entire foundation begins to shift beneath your feet. Claire felt that truth the moment the conference room emptied. The discovery about the hurricane archives changed everything. Someone inside Raphael's organization was feeding information to the very people they were trying to identify. Every lead they followed was somehow reaching the wrong ears. Every step forward seemed to trigger a response. By late afternoon, the atmosphere inside the penthouse had transformed completely. Security personnel moved with greater urgency. Conversations stopped whenever someone entered a room. Phones rang more frequently. Even the city skyline beyond the windows seemed colder beneath the approaching evening clouds. Claire found Raphael standing alone on the terrace overlooking the harbor. The wind tugged gently at his jacket as he stared toward the distant water. "You already know who it is, do you not?" she asked quietly. Raphael did not answer immediately. "I know who I am afraid it might be." Claire stepped beside him. Below them, ferries crossed the bay. Cars crawled along bridges illuminated by early evening lights. The city looked beautiful from above. Raphael finally nodded. The admission seemed to cost him something. "He has worked beside me for almost 10 years. That long? Long enough to become family." The word lingered between them, family. Claire suddenly understood why Raphael had hesitated to act. Evidence could expose a traitor. Evidence could not erase a decade of loyalty, or what had once appeared to be loyalty. "Maybe there is another explanation," Claire offered. Raphael gave a faint smile. "That is exactly what I have been telling myself." Before either could continue, one of Raphael's senior advisors stepped onto the terrace. "We found something." Minutes later, they gathered inside a private screening room connected to the penthouse office. Several monitors displayed financial records, travel logs, and communication reports. Most meant little to Claire. Then a timeline appeared. The room grew silent. One investigator highlighted a series of dates. "Every security breach aligns with one specific pattern," he explained. Anthony was present before each incident. Nobody spoke. The evidence was not absolute, but it was becoming difficult to ignore. Then another image appeared on the screen, a surveillance photograph taken 6 weeks before the hurricane. Claire leaned forward. Raphael did not move. Anthony stood inside a private marina parking lot, speaking with a man whose face remained partially hidden. The timestamp matched the same week Raphael's location had somehow been leaked. "Can you identify the second person?" Raphael asked. Gator shook his head. "Not yet." The answer disappointed everyone. But Claire noticed something strange. The hidden man's hand rested against the side of a vehicle. A distinctive ring reflected sunlight, the same ring from the hurricane photograph. "Wait," Claire said. The room turned toward her. She pointed at the screen. "That ring." Silence followed. The investigator enlarged the image. The resolution was poor, but the ring remained visible. Raphael stared at it. His expression hardened. "It is the same one." For the first time, certainty replaced suspicion. Anthony might not be the man standing beneath the umbrella during the storm, but he was connected to him. The room erupted into focused discussion. New files appeared. New timelines, new possibilities. Yet while everyone else concentrated on the investigation, Claire noticed Raphael growing quieter, more distant. Less than an hour later, she found him alone again, this time inside his office. City lights reflected across the dark windows behind him. "You should be celebrating," she said. "We finally found something real." Raphael looked up slowly. "And if it is true," Claire hesitated, "then we deal with it." Raphael leaned back in his chair. "Anthony was there when my younger brother died. The confession arrived without warning." Claire remained silent. "He was one of the few people I trusted afterward." His voice stayed calm, but the weight beneath it was impossible to miss. Suddenly, this investigation became even clearer. The betrayal was not only professional, it was personal, deeply personal. Claire moved closer. Whatever happens next, you will not face it alone. Raphael looked at her for several seconds. Something softened in his expression, gratitude. Then, a sharp knock interrupted the moment. One of the security officers entered carrying a phone. "Sir," he said carefully, "you need to see this immediately." Raphael accepted the device. Claire watched his face change as he read the message. The color drained from his expression. "What is it?" she asked. Raphael slowly turned the screen toward her. A single photograph filled the display. It showed Claire leaving her veterinary clinic 3 days earlier. Beneath the image appeared a message. "We know she helped you, and we know where she works." The photograph changed the atmosphere inside the penthouse instantly. Until that moment, the investigation had felt distant, hidden behind documents, surveillance images, and unanswered questions. Now it was personal in a way Claire could not ignore. She stared at the image on the phone screen. It showed her stepping out of the veterinary clinic carrying a box of supplies. An ordinary moment, a normal day. Yet someone had been watching closely enough to capture it. "When was this taken?" she asked quietly. "One of the security officers checked the metadata 3 days ago." Raphael's jaw tightened. "Increase protection around the clinic immediately." The officer nodded and left the room without hesitation. Claire looked up. "I do not need bodyguards. This is no longer about what you need. That is not your decision." The words came out sharper than she intended. For a second, neither moved. Then Raphael exhaled slowly. "You are right." The answer surprised her. "But someone is trying to pressure me through you. I will not ignore that." The honesty softened her frustration. Deep down she knew he was right. Whoever had sent the photograph wanted a reaction. Fear, uncertainty, leverage. The next morning began before sunrise. Grey light filtered through the penthouse windows while the city slowly awakened below. Claire joined Raphael in the private conference room where several members of his team had gathered around a digital map. New information had arrived overnight. Phone records, travel logs, financial transfers, small pieces of a larger puzzle. Anthony Marino's name appeared repeatedly. Not enough to prove guilt, enough to make coincidence impossible. "Show her," Raphael said. One of the analysts displayed a timeline stretching across the screen. Claire studied it carefully. Every major breach connected to Raphael's movements had occurred shortly after Anthony received specific communications, the pattern repeated again and again. He had access to everything, the analyst explained. Travel schedules, meeting locations, security rotations. Claire felt a sinking sensation in her chest. Betrayal looked different when laid out in neat rows of data, less emotional, more devastating, because the evidence spoke without anger, without bias, only facts. "Does he know you suspect him?" she asked. Raphael shook his head. "Not yet." The answer seemed to relieve everyone in the room, everyone except Raphael himself. Claire noticed it immediately. The closer they moved toward the truth, the heavier the burden appeared to become. Later that afternoon, Raphael requested a private meeting at one of his waterfront properties. The location sat beside an old shipyard that had survived the hurricane. Rusted cranes stretched toward the sky. Cargo containers lined the docks. The air smelled of salt and weathered steel. Claire remained inside a nearby office while Raphael met several trusted associates. Through the window, she watched conversations unfold across the harbor. Men arrived. Documents changed hands. Information moved quietly through the network. Hours passed. Then something unexpected happened. One of Raphael's investigators hurried into the office carrying a tablet. "We found it." Claire stood immediately. "Found what?" The investigator turned the screen toward her. A surveillance image filled the display. It had been recovered from a private parking structure near the marina. The quality was dramatically better than anything they had seen before. Claire's breath caught. The man wearing the distinctive ring was clearly visible now. Not perfect. Not close enough for every detail. Close enough. The office door opened before she could speak. Raphael entered. One look at the screen told him everything. Silence followed. The investigator stepped back. Nobody interrupted. Nobody rushed him. For several seconds Raphael stared at the image. Then he nodded once, slowly, almost reluctantly. "It is him." Claire felt the weight of those words settle over the room. "Anthony?" Raphael looked away from the screen. Yes, no uncertainty remained. No room for alternative explanations. The mystery that had begun during the hurricane finally had a face. Unfortunately for everyone involved, the discovery brought another problem. Moments later, a secure phone began ringing. One of the investigators answered. His expression darkened immediately. "Sir," the investigator turned, swallowed once. "Anthony just left the city." The room fell silent. "Where is he going?" Raphael asked. The answer arrived seconds later from a tracking report. An abandoned shipyard outside the harbor. Claire looked through the office window toward the fading sunlight reflecting across the water. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the man they had trusted for years was moving toward his next destination. And for the first time since the storm, Rafael Castellano finally knew exactly who had betrayed him. The harbor was wrapped in fog when they arrived. Dawn had not yet broken across the water, leaving the abandoned shipyard suspended between darkness and morning. Rusted cranes towered above silent warehouses. Weathered containers stretched across the shoreline like forgotten monuments. Claire remained inside the vehicle as Raphael and his team moved through the property. Nobody rushed. Nobody raised their voices. The atmosphere felt strangely calm considering how much was at stake. For weeks, every answer had pointed toward this moment. Every photograph, every surveillance image, every piece of evidence, it all led here. Through the windshield, Claire watched fog drift across the harbor in slow waves. Somewhere beyond the mist, Anthony Marino waited, the man who had stood beside Raphael for years, the man who now stood at the center of the mystery. Several minutes later, Raphael disappeared inside one of the warehouses. Claire sat alone, listening to distant seagulls and the low hum of water against the docks. The wait felt endless. Then her phone vibrated. A message appeared from Raphael. "Stay where you are." It should have reassured her. It made her more nervous. Time stretched. 10 minutes. 15. 20. Finally, the warehouse doors opened. Raphael emerged first. Anthony followed several steps behind. Claire immediately noticed something unexpected. There was no anger visible between them. No confrontation, no dramatic scene, only exhaustion of two men carrying the weight of a broken friendship. Raphael approached the vehicle and opened the passenger door. "It is over," he said quietly. Claire studied his face. "What happened?" Raphael looked toward the harbor before answering. "The truth." Later that morning, back at the penthouse, the full story finally came together. Anthony had not acted alone. Years earlier, a rival organization had approached the death of Raphael's younger brother. They understood exactly where to apply pressure. Grief, regret, guilt. Small compromises eventually became larger ones. Information began changing hands, locations, meetings, travel schedules. Anthony convinced himself he could control the damage, convinced himself nobody would get hurt. Then the hurricane changed everything. The planned leak of Raphael's location created consequences far beyond what Anthony expected. By the time he realized how far events had gone, it was too late to stop them. Claire listened quietly as the final pieces settled into place. The mysterious figure beneath the umbrella, the marina meetings, the surveillance photographs, the archive break-in. Every unanswered question finally received an answer. The mystery that began on a flooded road had reached its conclusion, yet solving it brought little satisfaction, only sadness. "Do you forgive him?" Claire asked after the others left the room. Raphael remained silent for a long moment. "I understand him." His eyes drifted toward the city skyline. "That is not the same thing." Claire nodded slowly. Some wounds never fully disappeared. Some betrayals left permanent scars even after the truth emerged. The afternoon passed quietly. For the first time in weeks, no emergency meetings interrupted conversations. No new evidence appeared. No hidden threats emerged from the shadows. The storm surrounding Raphael's life had finally begun to settle. As evening approached, Claire stood alone beside the penthouse windows. The city glowed beneath a sky painted with orange and gold. Beautiful, peaceful, temporary. She heard footsteps behind her. Raphael stopped beside her. Neither spoke immediately. The silence felt comfortable now, familiar. "You can go home," he said eventually. Claire looked at him. The words surprised her more than anything else. "That is what you are worried about." A faint smile appeared. "I promised I would not make decisions for you." Claire stared out at the horizon. For weeks her world had been consumed by mysteries, secrets and questions. Now those questions were gone. Only choices remained. "What if I am not ready to leave yet?" she asked softly. Raphael's expression softened in a way she had never seen before. Not relief. Not victory. Hope. Real hope. Before he could answer, the final rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the harbor. The city lights brightened below. The mystery was over. The truth was known. Yet for Claire Dawson and Raphael Castellano, the most important decision still waited with the sunrise. 8 weeks after the hurricane, the ocean looked completely different. The same shoreline that had once been swallowed by floodwater now shimmered beneath a clear spring sky. Fishing boats moved peacefully across the bay. Families walked along the boardwalk. Children chased seagulls near the pier. If someone had arrived that morning without knowing the town's history, they would never have guessed a storm had once torn through it. Claire Dawson stood outside her veterinary clinic watching the sunlight dance across the water. The repairs were finally finished. Fresh paint covered the exterior walls, new windows reflected the bright sky, flower boxes sat beneath each window frame. Life had returned. Not exactly the same life, a better one. Inside the clinic, several rescued animals rested comfortably in newly renovated recovery rooms funded by anonymous donations. Claire knew exactly where those donations had come from. The donor simply refused to take credit. Her phone vibrated softly. A message appeared. Outside, Claire smiled despite herself. She stepped through the front door and immediately spotted a familiar black vehicle parked across the street. Some things never changed. Raphael stood beside the waterfront railing overlooking the harbor. The wind carried the scent of salt water through the afternoon air. Unlike the first time she had seen him after the hurricane, there were no security teams hovering nearby. No tension, no urgency. Just a man waiting patiently beside the ocean. Claire walked toward him. You know, most people call before showing up. Raphael looked toward her with the same quiet smile she had learned to recognize over the past several weeks. I did call. A text message is not a call. Claire laughed softly. The sound blended with distant waves striking the shoreline. For a moment neither spoke. They simply stood beside each other watching sunlight reflect across calm water. The silence felt comfortable, familiar, earned. Finally Raphael reached into his jacket pocket and removed a folded document. What is that? Claire asked. The final report. She accepted it carefully. The investigation was officially closed. Every unanswered question had been resolved. Anthony Marino had admitted everything. The network responsible for the information leaks had been dismantled. The people who spent months manipulating events from the shadows were no longer part of either of their lives. The storm was truly over. Claire looked up from the report. How do you feel? Raphael considered the question carefully. Lighter. The answer surprised her. Not angry. I was angry for a long time. His eyes followed a sailboat drifting across the harbor. Eventually you realize anger is another kind of prison. Claire nodded slowly. She understood exactly what he meant. During the past several weeks she had changed too. The woman who dragged a stranger through floodwater, strength meant handling everything alone. She no longer believed that. Some people entered your life unexpectedly. Some people changed it completely. I have something for you, Raphael said. Claire immediately looked suspicious. If it is another pile of cash, I am walking away. His laughter arrived before he could stop it. Genuine laughter, rare enough to feel like a gift. No cash. He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a framed photograph. Claire stared at it for several seconds. It was not a picture from the fundraiser, not a surveillance image, not evidence from the investigation. It was a photograph taken the previous week during the clinic reopening. Claire stood surrounded by rescued animals, smiling without realizing anyone had been taking pictures. You kept this? She asked. I like it. Her eyes lifted toward him. Why? Raphael's answer arrived without hesitation. Because it reminds me who saved my life. The words settled gently between them. No dramatic declarations, no grand speeches, just honesty, the kind that mattered most. The afternoon slowly drifted toward evening. Together they walked along the waterfront while the town prepared for sunset. Streetlights flickered on one by one. Music drifted from open patios overlooking the bay. Life continued. Ordinary, beautiful, real. Eventually they reached the same stretch of shoreline where the ocean met the horizon. The sky glowed gold and amber. Waves rolled peacefully onto the sand. Claire stopped walking and looked out across the water. Weeks earlier, a hurricane had transformed this place into chaos, fear, uncertainty, survival. Now only calm remained. Raphael stepped beside her. Their shoulders nearly touched. Neither looked away from the horizon. As the sun settled beyond the ocean, the last light reflected across the water like liquid gold, and standing there beneath a peaceful sky, the woman who once pulled a wounded stranger from a storm finally understood something important. Sometimes saving a life changes two lives instead of one. The waves continued their gentle rhythm against the shore. The storm was gone. The mystery was solved. The future remained unwritten, but for the first time neither of them was afraid of what came next.